While the rest of the world tore itself apart, the Balkans watched and waited. No convoys from NATO crossed the Adriatic. No European brigades assembled in Thessaloniki, and the politicians in Brussels had long since stopped returning calls. The peninsula was on its own. In Skopje, the parliament made a quiet but defiant move. The name North Macedonia was gone. Once more, it was the Republic of Macedonia. The law passed with cheers in the chamber, but across the borders the reaction was far from polite. In Sofia, the foreign minister called it a reversal of history. In Athens, opposition leaders accused it of deliberate provocation. In Pristina, Albanian language news called it a nationalist step. For weeks, nothing happened. Soldiers drilled, ministers made speeches, newspapers filled columns with speculation. Then one Tuesday before dawn, the first explosion came. Not in the Balkans, but far to the south, in the eastern Mediterranean. The Turkish Navy steamed toward Cyprus in formation, destroyers and troop carriers cutting through black water. Radar on the Cypriot coast lit up with dozens of returns. Within minutes, the first shells landed, throwing sand and rock into the air. Cyprus had a small standing army, lightly equipped, barely enough to cover its own coastlines and cities. Turkey, by contrast, brought hundreds of armored vehicles, artillery pieces, and aircraft to the operation. Coastal guns answered, spitting fire at the incoming landing craft. A few boats shuddered under direct hits, spilling men into the surf. But the Turkish ships kept coming. At sunrise, armored vehicles rumbled ashore, pushing through trenches dug hastily the night before. Helicopters ferried troops inland to choke points before the defenders could organize. In Nicosia, the president sent an encrypted plea. Nicosia to Athens. They're on the ground in force. Without immediate air and naval support, we cannot hold until nightfall. In Athens, the reply came after a pause. Athens. Nicosia. Fleet is mobilizing, but the sea is against us. Hold as long as you can. The holding didn't last. By dusk, the red flag with the white crescent hung over government buildings. Cyprus was gone in a day. The shock of the fall rippled north. In Sofia, the Bulgarian General Staff met in a closed session. They had long kept plans for defensive security along the Macedonian border. Now, with Europe's eyes elsewhere, they would act. At dawn the next morning, artillery thundered through the hills east of Delchevo. Bulgarian armored brigades crossed the border under a covering barrage. Villages on the slopes of the Kosovo mountains woke to the thunder of treads on asphalt. Macedonia's army was small but determined. Against Bulgaria's stronger forces, which moved with speed and firepower, the defenders fought from behind stone walls and makeshift barricades. The first wave of enemy vehicles was slowed, some destroyed with anti-tank fire at close range. Retreating engineers demolished a key bridge over the Brigalnica River, delaying the advance for precious hours. But the Bulgarians pressed forward in two spearheads, one south toward Strumica, the other north toward Berovo. The battle for Strumica turned the city into a fortress. Apartment blocks became sniper nests. Streets were choked with overturned buses, sandbags, and rubble from collapsed facades. Grenades burst in stairwells. Machine guns rattled from windows. Smoke rolled over the rooftops, mixing with the winter fog. Berovo's defense was just as stubborn. The steep streets gave the defenders a vantage over every turn. They fought room to room, alley to alley, until ammunition ran low. And yet, there was no surrender. Orders came down for a coordinated fighting withdrawal. Under cover of darkness, Macedonian troops slipped west, leaving wrecked vehicles and mined roads behind them. By the third day, Bulgaria controlled a swath of eastern Macedonia, from the high ridges down to the outskirts of Strumica and Berovo. The rest of the front stabilized, but not for long. In Skopje, the president sent a direct message to Belgrade. Skopje to Belgrade. Eastern territories are falling. If we lose more ground, there will be nothing between them and you. The Serbian president replied within the hour. Belgrade to Skopje. Send coordinates of enemy logistics. Air support will fly before dawn. And so it did. At sunrise, Serbian strike aircraft swept in low over the Bregalnica Valley, targeting supply convoys and forward fuel depots. Explosions echoed in the mountains, slowing the Bulgarian advance to a crawl. That night, in a secure video call, the two leaders formalized their cooperation. It would be called the Balkan Shield, a mutual defense pact aimed at resisting any incursion, east or west. Serbia brought hundreds of artillery systems and thousands of troops to the alliance, tipping the balance on paper. But the real question was whether paper strength could hold in the field. And in the mountains, the next battle was about to begin. Just as Macedonian commanders began to breathe, new trouble erupted in the northwest. Armed insurgents crossed the mountains from Kosovo and Albania, targeting the Shara Planina region. Their goal was to break through to Tetovo. In the narrow passes near Vece, Macedonian troops held defensive lines dug into the slopes. The peaks loomed above like silent watchers, their white ridges masking the movements of the enemy until the last second. Fighting was brutal and close. Rifles cracking in short bursts, machine gun fire cutting across the frozen air. Mortar shells burst among the rocks, shattering patches of ice that tumbled like avalanches into the gullies below. For 2 days, the battle raged in the snow. Attack and counterattack, neither side yielding more than a few meters. Night brought no rest. Tracer fire arced over the dark ridgelines, and flares lit up the passes like ghostly daylight. When the weather turned, a blizzard swept across the high ground, muffling the roar of battle. The insurgents slipped back over the ridges under the storm's cover, leaving the slopes in Macedonian hands. The relief was short-lived. Before dawn, 2 days later, a second push came. This time not at the narrow passes, but deeper along the Polog Valley. Skirmishes erupted near Tearx, Brvenica, and the approaches to Želino. Insurgent units used goat paths and forest trails to swing wide, attempting to bypass strong points and hit the defenders from the rear. Macedonian patrols responded with ambushes in the pine forests, bursts of fire echoing down into the valley floor. By midweek, the northwest was a patchwork of contested ground. Villages changed hands in hours, some twice in a single day. Burned-out vehicles marked where ambushes had taken place. Roadblocks appeared overnight, only to be abandoned the next morning as the front shifted again. In Tetovo, the garrison turned every approach into a fortress. Road junctions were reinforced with sandbags, makeshift barricades, and overlapping fields of fire. Observation posts dotted the ridgelines, reporting every movement in the valleys below. Helicopter crews flew low over the fields to drop supplies where trucks couldn't reach, their rotors whipping snow into blinding clouds. Meanwhile, on the eastern front, Bulgarian patrols began to probe again. Nothing like the early assault, just small reconnaissance teams, slipping across the border to map Macedonian defenses or plant mines on mountain roads. In the hills near Kriva Palanka, a Macedonian outpost reported contact at dawn, exchanging fire with an unseen enemy before the attackers faded back into the forests. It was enough to remind everyone in Skopje. The East was only sleeping, not quiet. In the capital, the president sent a secure message to Belgrade. Skopje to Belgrade. Two fronts active. Northwest is unstable, east beginning to stir. If pressure builds on both, holding lines will become impossible. The Serbian president's reply came within the hour. Belgrade to Skopje. Secure Tetovo. We will take measures to relieve pressure from the north. Stand firm until then. The message was brief, but in the war rooms of Skopje, its meaning was clear. Serbia was preparing something big. As night fell over the Shar Planina, the sound of sporadic gunfire echoed through the valleys. Patrols moved under cover of darkness. Mines were laid along likely infiltration routes, and the defenders braced for another dawn attack. The eastern mountains stood in uneasy silence. The northwest burned with constant skirmishes, and far to the north, armored engines were warming up in Serbian depots. The Balkans had seen the sparks. Now came the fire. In the first days of the war, Turkey seized Cyprus in a single day. Bulgaria pushed deep into eastern Macedonia, and insurgents spilled over the ridges of Shar Planina. But as smoke drifted across the borders, another storm was brewing in the north. Serbia had not yet moved in full. That was about to change. In Belgrade, armored engines rumbled to life. Convoys of tanks and artillery rolled down highways under cover of darkness. Bridges across the Danube were sealed for military traffic. Soldiers received sealed orders in barracks across Niš, Kraljevo, and Kragujevac. Everyone knew where they were going, though no one dared say it aloud. The Serbian president had promised Skopje that Belgrade would act decisively. Now the promise would be fulfilled, and the target was Kosovo. For weeks, insurgent groups from Kosovo and Albania had been pouring across the Macedonian frontier, bleeding the defenders on the slopes of the Shar Planina. But their home front was exposed, and Serbia intended to strike it with overwhelming force. The operation was codenamed Iron Thunder. The offensive began before dawn. Serbian artillery batteries hidden in the forests outside Kuršumlija and Raška fired in unison. Shells streaked over the border, slamming into defensive outposts along the Ibar and White Drin rivers. Radar in Pristina lit up as incoming missiles cratered airstrips, fuel depots, and command centers. Communications faltered in the opening minutes. Columns of armor pushed across the frontier in 3 thrusts. One south along the Ibar Valley toward Mitrovica, another through Podujevo straight at Pristina, and a third swinging west toward Peja to cut the routes from Albania. The pace was relentless. Kosovo's defense had been planned with Albania's support. Bunkers dotted key hills. Anti-tank teams were hidden in the forests, and foreign volunteers had even joined the ranks. But Serbia brought numbers and firepower that dwarfed them. Hundreds of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles surged forward, with helicopter gunships flying low overhead, strafing roads and blasting trenches with rockets. The battle for Mitrovica erupted by mid-morning. Local defenders tried to hold the northern bridges across the Ibar River, barricading streets with buses and concrete slabs. For hours they resisted, knocking out several armored vehicles with shoulder-fired missiles. But the Serbian advance did not pause. Engineers threw temporary crossings over the river, and armored brigades swept into the city's northern districts. Street fighting flared in every block, but by afternoon, Serbian flags were raised on the municipal buildings. In the center thrust, Pristina became the true prize. By noon, Serbian mechanized brigades had closed within artillery range. Shells slammed into the outskirts, toppling apartment facades and shattering windows across the capital. Panic spread as columns of smoke rose on the horizon. The Kosovar president sent a desperate encrypted plea to Tirana, Pristina to Tirana. They're breaking through everywhere. If reinforcements cannot arrive today, the city is lost. The Albanian reply was cautious, even hesitant. Tirana, Pristina. Forces are assembling. Hold until tomorrow. But tomorrow would be too late. Serbian troops surged down the Podujevo road, supported by airstrikes that cratered every intersection ahead of them. By nightfall, armored spearheads reached the city's northern suburbs. Fighting raged in the districts, where defenders staged ambushes in narrow streets. The crack of rifles echoed from apartment balconies. Molotov cocktails rained from rooftops. Yet the momentum never broke. By the second day, Serbia tightened its grip. Mitrovica was fully under control, its bridges secured and crossings fortified. In the west, Serbian units reached Pea, cutting the corridor to Albania. Convoys attempting to bring aid from Kukes were halted by airstrikes on the border roads. In the south, the Jaroševac garrison fought desperately, but with the capital under siege, their position became untenable. All roads pointed to Pristina. At dawn on the second day, Serbian artillery unleashed a rolling barrage, pounding defensive lines kilometer by kilometer. Then the armor advanced, supported by mechanized infantry clearing streets block by block. Helicopters ferried troops to seize key junctions before the defenders could regroup. By noon, Serbian forces were in the heart of the city. Smoke and fire blanketed the skyline. Government ministries were evacuated under fire, their staff fleeing through side streets. The Kosovar president was whisked out by helicopter just minutes before Serbian units secured the government district. By evening, the Serbian flag flew over Pristina. The two-day campaign was over. Kosovo's organized resistance had collapsed. Some scattered units fled south toward the Albanian border. Others melted into the mountains. But as a state, Kosovo was gone, reabsorbed into Serbia's control with stunning speed. The victory sent shockwaves across the Balkans. In Tirana, fury erupted. Albania called emergency meetings with Croatia and Bulgaria, demanding action to counter Serbia's rising power. In Zagreb, leaders agreed, warning that if Serbia was left unchecked, the entire regional balance would collapse. And in Sofia, generals quietly promised to lend support to any coalition that would contain Belgrade. But while new alliances were already forming, one consequence was immediate. With Kosovo back in Serbian hands, the insurgents who had been bleeding Macedonia suddenly found their bases cut off. Fighters who once slipped across the border at night now faced the reality of Serbian troops stationed in every valley they used. Supplies dried up. Communications faltered, and with Macedonia's own garrisons tightening their defenses in Tetovo and the Polog Valley, the insurgent campaign began to unravel. In Skopje, a message was sent north. Skopje to Belgrade. Your strike has broken their back. Our northwest is quieting. Macedonia owes Serbia a debt. The reply came swiftly, from a president now confident in his triumph. Belgrade to Skopje. The shield holds. Stand firm. Together we decide the future. But elsewhere, not everyone was celebrating. In Sarajevo, anger boiled as Republika Srpska leaders declared they would no longer answer to the Federation. What began as a proclamation would soon ignite gunfire. And while Bosnia edged toward civil war, the Balkans braced for the next widening of the fire. In Banja Luka, the Parliament of Republika Srpska gathered in emergency session. Flags of the entity draped the walls as deputies voted overwhelmingly in favor of independence. Within hours, their declaration was broadcast across Serb-language channels. Republika Srpska would no longer recognize the authority of Sarajevo. The reaction in the Bosnian capital was furious. The Federation's president called it an illegal coup, warning that no territory would be allowed to break away. The denial came not only with words, but with mobilization orders. Army units loyal to the Federation began moving toward key checkpoints along the inter-entity boundary line. Within days, the first firefights broke out. Militants loyal to Republika Srpska set up roadblocks near Doboj and Brčko, halting convoys and clashing with police. In the hills outside Prijedor, gunfire echoed at dawn as local units exchanged fire across makeshift trenches. Sarajevo responded with reinforcements, but these columns came under sudden mortar fire, leaving burned-out vehicles smoldering on the roadside. The fingerprints of Belgrade were everywhere. Serbian supplies flowed quietly across the Drina, carried on back roads under cover of night. Ammunition, radios, even small groups of advisors, all ensuring that the uprising in Republika Srpska would not collapse. Zagreb watched with growing alarm. In the Croatian capital, debates ended swiftly. The Federation could not be abandoned. Trucks carrying aid, weapons, and volunteers began to roll east, and soon Croatian-backed fighters were reinforcing positions near Mostar and Tuzla. What emerged was not yet a formal war, but a proxy battlefield where Serbia and Croatia stared each other down through their Bosnian allies. While Bosnia burned in fragments, diplomacy elsewhere began to harden into shape. In Tirana, the leaders of Albania, Croatia, and Bulgaria met under the banner of a new coalition. They called it the Two Seas Alliance, symbolizing the Adriatic to the west and the Black Sea to the east. Its stated purpose was defensive, to contain Serbia's growing reach. Its unspoken purpose was offensive, to counterbalance Belgrade's victory in Kosovo. At the signing ceremony, Albania's prime minister declared, "No single power will dictate the fate of the Balkans. Together, we are stronger than any one state." Croatia pledged brigades for joint operations. Bulgaria promised air bases and artillery, and Albania offered to open supply corridors to any member in need. Almost immediately, the coalition invited Slovenia to join. In Ljubljana, the government accepted without hesitation. Overnight, the Two Seas Alliance grew into a bloc stretching from the Adriatic to the Carpathians. In Belgrade, the response was defiant. The Serbian president mocked the coalition as a wall built on sand, claiming that it would crumble at the first true test. Yet behind closed doors, the escalation was taken seriously. Serbia already had Macedonia tied to its flank in the Balkan Shield Pact. Now, its leaders looked to the Adriatic. Montenegro sat quietly between the blocks, its government nervous but undecided. For weeks, Podgorica tried to avoid choosing sides, but geography and history left little room for neutrality. Late one evening, a direct message arrived from Belgrade. Belgrade to Podgorica. Your coast is unguarded. Alone, you invite danger. With us, you are safe. Hours later, after tense cabinet debates, Montenegro sent its reply. Podgorica to Belgrade. We will not stand alone. The Balkan Shield extends to the Adriatic. The alliance was sealed. Serbia, Macedonia, and now Montenegro formed a contiguous bloc stretching from the Danube to the coast. The Balkan Shield was no longer a promise, it was a reality. On the ground, the balance of power looked uncertain. In Kosovo, Serbian troops consolidated control, sweeping roads and fortifying garrisons. In Bosnia, firefights flickered daily, small clashes that could at any moment flare into a wider war. In eastern Macedonia, Bulgarian patrols still probed across the highlands, though large offensives had paused. And in the northwest, Macedonia's relief from insurgent attacks gave the front a rare silence. But the silence would not last. While the Balkans seemed locked in chaos, a new storm was brewing further east. In Turkey, large-scale troop movements began pouring into the Thrace region, massing around the city of Edirne, just kilometers from the Greek and Bulgarian borders. For Athens and Sofia, this was a chilling development. Was Ankara preparing for simple drills, or was it a prelude to a direct land invasion? The answer would come soon enough. The Balkans had already been set ablaze. Cyprus was gone. Kosovo had fallen. Bosnia teetered on the edge. But the next storm would not begin in the mountains of Macedonia or the valleys of Bosnia. It would erupt on the plains of Thrace. For weeks, Turkish forces had been gathering along the border near Edirne. Entire divisions redeployed from Anatolia, armored columns moving west beneath the cover of night. Bridges across the Maritsa River were sealed for military use. Locals whispered of endless convoys, tanks, self-propelled artillery, fuel trucks, stretching as far as the eye could see. Athens watched nervously. Greece had been humiliated with the fall of Cyprus. Now it braced for something worse, an assault on its own soil. Intelligence briefings warned that Turkey's massing army was not for show. The question was not if Ankara would strike, but when. The answer came before dawn. At 400 hours, the silence along the border shattered. Turkish artillery batteries east of Edirne thundered, their shells raining across the Evros River into Greek outposts. Radar stations near Orestiada lit up with incoming signatures. Communications posts went dark within minutes. Across the frontier, armored brigades surged forward. The battle for Thrace had begun. Columns of Turkish armor crossed the border bridges under covering fire, advancing toward Orestiada in the north and Komotini further south. Infantry followed close behind, feeding live coordinates back to fire control centers. Turkish aircraft screamed across the dawn sky, unleashing precision strikes on Greek artillery positions dug into the hills. The Greek defenders fought with desperation. Their artillery, though fewer in number, fired salvo after salvo into the advancing armor, knocking out lead vehicles and slowing the spearhead. Engineers blew charges along key bridges and culverts, forcing Turkish convoys to reroute through exposed ground. In the skies, Greek pilots scrambled from bases near Alexandroupoli, intercepting waves of Turkish fighters and bombers. Dogfights erupted high above Thrace, contrails scarring the morning sky. But the weight of numbers was against them. Turkish armored brigades pressed forward relentlessly. Mechanized infantry pushed through gaps, while heavy artillery batteries blanketed Greek strongpoints. Villages along the Evros were reduced to rubble. By midday, Turkish vanguards had bypassed Orestiada, forcing Greek units to fall back in disorder. Komotini was next under threat as mechanized battalions surged westward. Greece's defensive lines were crumbling. Local commanders begged for reinforcements, but reserves were already stretched thin, scattered between holding the islands in the Aegean and guarding the approaches to Thessaloniki. The government in Athens faced the grim prospect that Thrace itself might be lost. Still, resistance was fierce. In the wooded ridges west of Komotini, Greek infantry staged ambushes with anti-tank weapons, halting convoys long enough to evacuate civilians. Artillery hidden in olive groves struck at Turkish fuel trucks, sparking towering fires that lit the horizon. Yet for every Turkish column slowed, another pressed forward. By the third day, Turkish units had entered Xanthi. The city fell after hours of bitter fighting, its defenders withdrawing in fragments toward Kavala. Panic rippled through the Greek population. Refugees streamed westward, clogging the roads. Rumors spread in Athens that Thessaloniki itself might be the next objective. But then unexpectedly, the offensive stalled. Turkish high command ordered a halt to the advance beyond Xanthi. Columns that had been pressing toward Kavala dug in instead, fortifying captured ground. For Greek commanders, the pause was baffling but welcome, a breathing space they desperately needed. The reason lay far to the east. Reports emerged that in Turkey's remote provinces, Kurdish insurgents had risen once more. Entire battalions were being diverted back to the interior to contain the rebellion. Ankara, faced with the nightmare of fighting on two fronts, chose to consolidate its gains in Thrace rather than risk overextension. While Greece scrambled to regroup, another flashpoint threatened to widen the conflict. Along the northern frontier, near the Bulgarian border, a Turkish artillery barrage overshot its intended targets and detonated within Bulgarian territory. The incident sent shockwaves through Sofia. For decades, Bulgaria had walked a cautious line between its Balkan neighbors, but now its military went on full alert. Border defenses were reinforced, armored units redeployed, and air patrols expanded. Though Bulgaria had no desire to be dragged into war, the fear of escalation was palpable. Any further misstep could transform the conflict from a bilateral struggle into a full Balkan conflagration. For now, the front settled into uneasy silence. Turkey held a swath of Thrace, anchored on Xanthi. Greece, bloodied but unbroken, scrambled to fortify new defensive lines further west. In Athens, leaders weighed their next moves. The plains of Thrace lay scarred, villages burned, towns occupied, and armies facing one another across a fragile, shifting line. The war was far from over, but the real shock came from Bosnia. In Banja Luka, the Republika Srpska president gave a fiery televised speech. "We will not be a nation divided. The Republic of Srpska will stand with its Serbian brothers. We are one people, and we are one land." The broadcast rippled across the region. In Zagreb, Croatian leaders watched in horror. The Serbian-Croatian proxy conflict had just become something far more serious. The Croatian president sent a direct, unencrypted message to Belgrade. "Zagreb to Belgrade. Any attempt to absorb Republika Srpska will be met with full military force. Do not mistake our patience for weakness." The response from Belgrade was swift and unapologetic. "Belgrade to Zagreb. The will of the people will be honored. Interference will be considered an act of war." 4 hours later, Zagreb fired back with a sharper warning. "Zagreb to Belgrade. The Federation does not stand alone." The Two Seas Alliance stands ready to defend Bosnia. The two nations were now on a direct collision course, with Bosnia as the final battlefield. Belgrade, meanwhile, placed its army on high alert. Armored brigades were ordered to assemble near Užice, close to the Drina. Trains carried supplies westward under blackout conditions. Serbian generals spoke of defensive deployments. But the intent was clear. They were ready to cross if Republika Srpska called. But the Balkans had more than one fuse burning. In Tirana, Albania pressed its allies to finish what had begun in Kosovo. Secure lines carried a blunt appeal. Tirana, alliance leadership. Kosovo remains stolen ground. Now is the moment. United we strike and reclaim what was taken. Delay, and the chance is gone. The proposal sent ripples through the alliance, yet resistance emerged from Bulgaria. Fearful of Turkish retaliation after the Thrace incident, Sofia broke its silence with an unusually sharp rebuke. Sofia, alliance leadership. No strike on Kosovo, not while Turkish armor sits across our border. You risk dragging us all into ruin. The message revealed the fracture. Albania pushing for escalation. Bulgaria pulling back in dread of Turkey. Macedonia, too, stirred quietly. Its eastern ridges remained under Bulgarian control, but in the shadows of the highlands, divisions began to gather. Hidden artillery positions were dug into clearings. Stockpiles of ammunition quietly expanded. Skopje's purpose was clear. With Bulgaria's gaze fixed southward on the Turkish threat, Macedonia prepared to exploit the distraction and reclaim the lands it had lost. It was a silent preparation, one that only a handful of generals knew was underway. Indeed, in Sofia, fear outweighed ambition. The incident on the border had rattled Bulgaria to its core. Mobilization orders poured across the southern frontier. Brigades dug trenches, artillery was pulled from storage, and defensive belts were thrown up across the mountains. But there was no appetite for a wider war. Every Bulgarian officer knew one more mistake with Turkey, and Sofia itself could become a battlefield. For now, the armies stared across borders, tense and waiting. But in Bosnia, the silence was already cracking. Local clashes between police units and paramilitaries spread near Doboj and Brčko. Roadblocks appeared overnight, manned by masked men with assault rifles. Sarajevo called it criminal disorder. Banja Luka called it self-defense. Both sides prepared for worse. The peninsula stood at the edge. Thrace smoldered. Macedonia waited. Bulgaria trembled. And in Bosnia, the embers glowed brighter with each passing night. The next fire was about to ignite. The Balkans had been holding its breath. For weeks, the fronts had stabilized, the battle lines hardening into an uneasy peace. Turkey held its ground in Thrace. Serbia, in its victory in Kosovo, seemed content to consolidate. But beneath the surface, the leaders of the Two Seas Alliance had been planning, coordinating, and arming for a blow so swift and decisive it would rewrite the map of the region in a single day. The lie of peace was about to be exposed. The signal was a single encrypted message sent from Zagreb to Tirana, timed to the exact minute. It was a simple phrase, devoid of any official pretense, yet loaded with the weight of a coming storm. Zagreb to Tirana. The time is now. We move on the first objective. Checkmate. At 4:30 in the morning, a tremor ran through the ground along the entire inter-entity boundary line in Bosnia. Then came the thunder. A combined force of Croatian and Bosnian armies, backed by the full force of the Slovenian army, surged across the frontier in a perfectly executed two-pronged thrust. This was no skirmish. It was a full-scale invasion, a surprise that stunned the region into silence. The first, fragmented reports of the invasion reached Belgrade in a panicked flurry. Banja Luka to Belgrade. We are under full-scale attack. The Croats have crossed the border in force. Our defenses are crumbling. We need immediate aid. The first spearhead, a column of tanks and mechanized infantry, drove straight toward the city of Doboj, a critical railway and road junction. Doboj's defenders, a mix of lightly armed military units and hardened militias, fought with a desperate ferocity that bordered on suicidal. They detonated bridges, fired anti-tank missiles from forest ambushes, and held their ground in hastily dug trenches. They knew their cause was vital. But they were facing a professional army, one that moved with brutal speed and overwhelming firepower. Croatian forces bypassed pockets of resistance, leaving them to be mopped up by follow-on infantry. The city's outskirts became a killing field as the defenders were systematically overwhelmed. Simultaneously, a second, more powerful armored column surged from the west, its objective the political heart of the breakaway republic, Banja Luka. Here, the fighting was more organized, more fierce. The city's defenders had been warned, but not of the sheer scale of the attack. They fought from behind barricades and from the rooftops of apartment buildings, turning every street into a kill zone. For a few hours, the advance was slowed, but the Croatian army used its superior numbers to encircle the city. cutting off all avenues of reinforcement. Another crucial thrust struck at the city of Prijedor, aiming to cut off the northern defenses and split Republika Srpska in two. The resistance there was fierce, but brief. Within hours, the front lines had collapsed and the defensive formations were in full retreat. Meanwhile, from the south, the main Bosnian army moved out of Sarajevo in a coordinated pincer movement. Their objective was to converge with the Croatian forces at key junctions, cutting off any remaining escape routes for the fleeing forces of Republika Srpska and securing all strategic points. This was an act of national unification and a show of strength, demonstrating that a single unified Bosnia now stood allied with the Two Seas Alliance. Belgrade was in a state of controlled fury. The orders were swift and direct. Mobilize all available units. Republika Srpska is under attack. We will move to the Drina at once to reinforce our brothers. But it was a race against time, and the Croats and Bosnians were already far ahead. The surprise was total. By the time Serbian convoys even began to assemble, the news from Bosnia was already grim. The front near Doboj had collapsed. The city of Prijedor was under siege. The Two Seas Alliance had moved with a lightning precision that defied all expectations, and its forces were now closing in on Banja Luka and Brčko, aiming to completely sever the eastern and western parts of the Republic. The Wall of Sand had just become a fortress. While Bosnia bled, the second front opened. In the early morning hours, the roar of artillery and heavy machine gun fire echoed across the Albanian-Kosovar border. This was no unorganized raid. This was a full-scale offensive. Albanian regular army units, coordinating with a reformed and re-equipped Kosovar Liberation Army, launched a two-pronged attack. One thrust, aiming for Peja and the western border passes. The other pushing toward the strategic city of Uroševac in the south. In Pristina, the Serbian garrison was put on high alert. The commander sent a panicked message to Belgrade. Pristina to Belgrade. Heavy enemy contact on southern and western fronts. This is not insurgents. This is an army. Requesting reinforcements immediately, Belgrade stared at two red lines on its war map. One was the Croatian and Bosnian advance in Bosnia, threatening to erase Republika Srpska. The other was the Albanian push into Kosovo, threatening the territory it had just seized with so much blood. The choice was brutal, but it was clear. The war in Bosnia was a fight for an ally. The war in Kosovo was a fight for Serbian soil. Belgrade issued a new order. Republika Srpska is a lost cause. Pull back and dig in. All available forces to Kosovo. Activate the Balkan Shield. And in Skopje, the orders arrived. The Macedonian High Command was meeting, poring over maps of the Bulgarian-occupied territories. The call from Belgrade was an interruption, but not an unwelcome one. Belgrade to Skopje. The shield is engaged. We need you now. Secure the southern border and send 2 mechanized battalions to reinforce Pristina. Your fight for the northwest is over. Our fight for the south begins. Skopje did not hesitate. Its forces finally rested from the insurgent attacks, mobilized with a renewed purpose. Convoys of armored vehicles and troop carriers moved north, not to defend their own land, but to fight on what was now, by alliance, Serbian soil. Montenegrin forces secured their own border with Albania, blocking any potential flanking maneuvers and providing a critical logistical corridor for the Balkan Shield. The Albanian and Kosovar forces were met with a wall of steel and fire. Serbian units, reinforced by Macedonian battalions, established a fortified line south of Pristina. A bloody battle erupted, with air power and artillery on both sides exchanging blows. The Albanians had the element of surprise, but the Serbs, Macedonians, and Montenegrins had the combined numbers and firepower. They dug in, holding every inch of ground, turning the valleys into a slaughterhouse for any who dared to advance. By the end of the third day, the outcome was sealed. In Bosnia, a message came to Belgrade, Banja Luka to Belgrade. We have been defeated. Our forces are surrendering. We will lay down our arms. Republika Srpska had fallen. Croatian and Slovenian forces, with the crucial support of the Bosnian army, occupied the major cities, and the dream of a unified Serbian state was shattered. The full state of Bosnia, now under the formal protection of the Two Seas Alliance, stood ready. But in Kosovo, the message was different. Pristina to Belgrade, enemy assault repelled. The front is secure, we held. The attack on Kosovo had failed. The Balkan shield had held. The alliance between Serbia, Macedonia, and Montenegro had proven its worth, repelling a direct and powerful assault on Serbian soil. The Balkan watched in stunned silence. The Two Seas Alliance had gained a massive victory in Bosnia, shattering Serbia's dream of a unified Serbian world. But the Balkan shield had held. The war was no longer about borders or land. The game had just begun. A storm was brewing. A great convergence was at hand. And in the quiet of a shattered region, the silence was a promise of a future yet to be written. The air crackled with a chilling anticipation, a new chapter in the history of the Balkans, waiting to unfold. The Balkans had fallen silent, but it was the silence of a storm gathering its strength. Months of war had redrawn borders, shattered armies, and left cities smoldering. Cyprus was gone, Kosovo was in Serbian hands, and Republika Srpska had collapsed in just 2 days. Out of the chaos, the Two Seas Alliance stood tall, celebrating its conquest in Bosnia. In Zagreb and Sarajevo, the mood was triumphant. They had cut away a Serbian protectorate with ruthless precision. To them, the humiliation in Kosovo was a fading scar, replaced by victory carved deep into the map of the Balkans. But this quiet was not peace. It was the pause before another strike. In Tirana, the leaders of Albania and Kosovo insurgents met in secret. Kosovo had been lost, but their ambition had not. Their eyes turned eastward. Macedonia, they argued, was the key. If it fell, Serbia would be forced to split its armies, and Kosovo could be taken in the chaos, but they could not do it alone. So the call went out. Tirana to Sofia. Macedonia is the gate. Break it, and Kosovo will fall. We stand ready by your side. In Sofia, hesitation lingered at first. Bulgarian eyes had been fixed on Turkey for weeks, watching for the slightest move. Yet Ankara had stayed still. No mobilization, no threats. The moment seemed ripe, and with ambition stirring, Bulgaria gave its answer. Sofia to Tirana. We accept. Macedonia will be ours. Kosovo will be yours. Together, we will crush the shield. The plan was bold. Bulgaria would invade Macedonia, tearing open the defenses of the Balkan shield. While Skopje and Belgrade scrambled to hold the line, Albania and Kosovo would strike westward, seizing what they had failed to win before. A double blow, designed to shatter the alliance from 2 directions. The Bulgarian offensive began at dawn, the roar of artillery echoing across the Kosovo mountains. Columns of armored brigades rolled through the early mist, supported by mechanized infantry and artillery. The first spearhead swept toward Delchevo, striking border posts with overwhelming firepower. Macedonian defenders fired a few bursts before falling back in disciplined retreat. Villages shook under the treads of tanks, their inhabitants fleeing as the invaders surged past. By noon, The Bulgarian vanguard had taken Delchevo and pushed on toward Kočani. Their resistance stiffened. Mines exploded under the lead vehicles, and anti-tank fire from the hills claimed several machines. After a few hours of fighting, the Macedonian units melted away, leaving behind smoldering wrecks, but not their main force. Kočani fell without a decisive battle. To the south, the second Bulgarian column advanced through Strumica. Unlike the northern route, this thrust met more deliberate resistance. Ambushes were laid in narrow valleys, forcing Bulgarian armor into choke points. Macedonian infantry teams with portable launchers struck from the slopes, inflicting damage before slipping away. Bridges were blown, forcing engineers to halt the advance and rebuild crossings under fire. The pace slowed, but the weight of Bulgarian numbers told. By nightfall, Strumica was theirs, and the road to Valandovo lay open. The third Bulgarian axis struck toward Štip, pushing west from the border. The town became a battlefield of broken streets and barricaded houses. Here, Macedonian militia fought fiercely, delaying the attackers for an entire day. But without reinforcements, even Štip could not hold. When the Bulgarians finally secured it, they found little more than ruins, and another retreating enemy slipping away into the interior. As the columns pressed deeper, the pattern became clear. Every town taken was empty of the Macedonian main force. Resistance was fierce but fragmented, just enough to bleed time and equipment. Reports streamed back to Sofia, warning of the unnatural ease of the advance. Yet the High Command dismissed the doubts. By the third day, Bulgarian forces had crossed the Bregalnica River. Southeastern Macedonia was firmly in their hands. Supply convoys rushed to keep up, clogging the mountain roads with fuel trucks and ammunition haulers. The front lines now reached the approaches of the Vardar River. From Skopje to Veles, Macedonian land lay open before them. And still, the Macedonian army had not shown itself. And all that with a reason, because the secret plan of the Two Seas Alliance was a mirage. The messages, cloaked in codes the Albanians thought unbreakable, were already known to the Balkan Shield. A compromised aide had been leaking ciphers for months. Within hours of the correspondence, the words of Sofia and Tirana were laid out on the desks of commanders in Belgrade. The news struck like thunder. A trap was being laid for them. But instead of panic, the Shield saw opportunity. They would not resist Bulgaria at the border. They would let them come. The east of Macedonia would be abandoned, only token resistance left behind. The true army would wait west of the Vardar River, fortified and prepared. And when Bulgaria crossed too far, when its divisions stretched deep into Macedonian soil, the hammer would fall. And another card was yet to be played. From Belgrade, a new message was drafted, not to Skopje, not to Podgorica, but northward. Belgrade to Bucharest. Bulgaria marches south. Soon their homeland will stand unguarded. When that moment comes, strike. The Shield will march with you. In Bucharest, the reply was not immediate. Through the night, Romania's leaders debated. Joining the war meant great risk, but also great reward. At last, ambition triumphed. Bucharest to Belgrade. The Shield is our shield and our spear. We march with you. The trap was complete, and the time has come. From the north, thunder rolled. At dawn, Romanian artillery unleashed a massive barrage across the Danube. Under its cover, armored divisions surged forward, crossing pontoon bridges erected overnight. The Bulgarian northern frontier was nearly bare. Most of its strength had been pulled south. Romanian forces swept across the plains like a flood. The desperate order went south. Withdraw at once. Romania has invaded. Defend the homeland. Ruse fell within hours. its defenders outnumbered and outgunned. To the west, Romanian tanks bypassed Pleven, driving instead for the highways leading toward Sofia. Entire villages surrendered without a fight. Bulgarian reserve units scrambled to organize defenses, but they were too few, too scattered. For Bulgarian troops deep inside Macedonia, the order was chaos. Columns that had marched proudly forward now turned in disorder, retreating under pressure of exhaustion and overstretched supply, roads clogged with vehicles moving east. In their haste, units abandoned positions, leaving equipment behind. As the offensive deepened, the Romanian Air Force struck rail lines, bridges, and depots, severing Bulgaria's logistics. Fuel shortages rippled across the Bulgarian military, stranding convoys and leaving entire battalions immobile. Panic spread in Sofia, where government officials received hourly updates of collapsing positions. The retreat converged toward the Black Sea coast. There on the plains outside Varna, the Bulgarian and Romanian armies collided. The Battle of Varna was brutal. Romanian tanks charged across open wheat fields, their advance shielded by rolling curtains of artillery fire. Bulgarian units, now defending their own soil, dug trenches and fortified villages with sandbags and anti-tank guns. The clash raged for days. Entire battalions of Romanian infantry were pinned down and by machine gun fire, while Bulgarian counterattacks with armored reserves struck into the flanks, only to be beaten back by relentless Romanian artillery. The skies above Varna became a battlefield in their own right. Romanian strike aircraft hunted Bulgarian columns on the roads, while Bulgarian fighters fought desperate dogfights to defend the city. Explosions lit up the night as fuel depots and ammunition stores were struck, painting the horizon in orange fire. By the third day, Romanian armor had broken through the outer defensive belts, forcing Bulgarians into block-by-block resistance on the city's outskirts. But the struggle did not end in Varna alone. To the west, near Shumen, another Romanian column pushed into the Bulgarian heartland. Here, the Bulgarians rallied with greater discipline. Artillery duels shook the ridgelines, and cavalry-like armored probes struck into open fields, attempting to outmaneuver the invaders. The clash at Shumen was savage. Villages were fought over 3 times in a single day, and entire hillsides were scarred with trenches and burning wreckage. Romanian units pressed hard but suffered heavy losses, and the battle stalled into a bloody stalemate. Still, even without victory, the Romanians had tied down vital Bulgarian reserves, ensuring that Varna's defenders stood alone. The twin struggles left Bulgaria staggering. At Varna, the city finally fell into Romanian hands, though scarred by fire and rubble. At Shumen, the Bulgarians managed to halt the Romanian advance, but only at the cost of thousands of casualties and precious equipment. For the Balkan shield, the moment had come. Belgrade to Skopje. The enemy withdraws. Their strength is broken. Push east. Retake what was lost. Macedonian and Serbian divisions, hidden for days west of the Vardar, now roared into action. Bridges were crossed, artillery unleashed, and long silent armored brigades stormed into the abandoned eastern towns. What Bulgaria had seized in 3 days, the shield prepared to reclaim in one furious counteroffensive. The war was shifting once again. Bulgaria had gambled on a swift strike and walked into a trap. Romania had risen, the shield was advancing, and the map of the Balkans was about to be redrawn once more. And in the silence before the next clash, one truth was clear. This was no longer a war of borders, it was a war of survival, and the storm was only just beginning. The silence that had settled over the Balkans was shattered not by a single strike, but by a cascade of thunder. For the Bulgarian army, the retreat from Macedonia had been a humiliating disaster. But for the Balkan Shield, it was the start of a triumphant counter-offensive. While Romanian tanks raced toward the Black Sea, Macedonian and Serbian divisions poured over the Vardar River into eastern Macedonia. What Bulgaria had seized in 3 days, the Shield prepared to reclaim in one furious counterattack. The pace of the advance stunned even the commanders themselves. Along the broken roads of eastern Macedonia, abandoned Bulgarian supply trucks stood like tombstones of a defeated army. The air smelled of fuel and scorched rubber, of men who had fled in panic. Rearguard detachments tried to buy time with ambushes, setting up machine guns on ridgelines and blocking bridges with mines. But they were swept aside with ruthless efficiency. The battles were brief, more pursuit than fight. A relentless chase of an army already broken. Skopje to Belgrade. Eastern Macedonia is retaken. Our forces now push across the border. They have offered little resistance. Belgrade to Skopje. Secure your ground. Your advance is the tip of our spear. Hit them where it hurts. The message captured the mood perfectly. For Macedonia, this was not just strategy, it was revenge. Their armored battalions, kept in reserve during the desperate defense of their homeland, now roared forward with engines screaming. South of the Pirin Mountains, they cut a path toward the Bulgarian border city of Petric. The clash was brief but brutal. Armored columns rolling into streets where panicked defenders scattered in every direction. Within hours, Petric fell, its garrison surrendering or fleeing north. But the Macedonians did not stop. Their spearhead pushed on to Sandanski, a far more vital stronghold. Here, the Bulgarians resisted with the bitterness of men who knew retreat was no longer an option. Barricades choked the roads, artillery shelled every approach, and snipers turned every ruined building into a trap. For half a day, Macedonian tanks fought street by street, house by house. Flames consumed whole blocks, artillery pounded the outskirts, and the thunder of close-quarters fighting shook the valley. By nightfall, Sandanski was theirs. The survivors who escaped north carried only grim news. The Shield was inside Bulgaria. Meanwhile, to the east, Serbian divisions surged in parallel, their armored columns rolling across the borderlands into Blagoevgrad. The defense was poorly organized, reservists, militia, and conscripts trying to hold against hardened mechanized brigades. Serbian artillery shelled the approaches relentlessly, pounding bunkers into rubble before the infantry moved in to sweep the ruins. By evening, the city was in Serbian hands. Its fall severed a vital artery, a logistical hub and escape route for Bulgaria's southern army. The Shield had not only reclaimed what was lost, it was now carving into Bulgaria itself. In Sofia, the mood was one of disbelief. Inside a dimly lit command post, generals bent over maps that shrank by the hour. 2 fronts were active, both bleeding their army dry. The Romanian invasion from the north was bad enough, but the new counteroffensive from the south was a psychological blow. With their army stretched and broken, they knew they could not hold. A message, heavy with the weight of defeat, was sent to the rest of the alliance. Sofia to Zagreb. Our lines are collapsing. We need immediate, direct aid. The capital is at risk. We are a hair's breadth from falling. In the capitals of the Two Seas Alliance, the words sent shockwaves. Bulgaria, the shield of their southern flank, was shattering. They had expected stubborn resistance, a defense that would bleed the shield dry. Instead, Bulgaria looked more like a domino toppling in slow motion. If it fell, the road into their alliance heartland would lie open. The question was no longer whether to act, but how. In Zagreb, the leaders of the alliance gathered in emergency session. The air was tense. thick with the smell of sweat and cigarette smoke. Maps of Bulgaria and Serbia sprawled across tables marked with red and blue arrows. The verdict came swiftly. They could not waste their strength saving Bulgaria directly. Instead, they would strike where it hurt most, at the center of the Balkan shield, Serbia. The decision was as ruthless as it was logical. If Serbia could be forced to defend its own homeland, it would have no choice but to recall troops from the Bulgarian front. Pressure on Sofia would ease, and the alliance might stabilize its crumbling line. The plan was bold, dangerous, and immediate. Zagreb to Ljubljana. The time to strike is now. Launch a full-scale invasion of Serbia from the north. Hit them where they are weakest. A combined Croatian, Slovenian, and Bosnian force, long prepared and waiting on the northern border, surged into Serbia. The primary assault was a two-pronged attack, one thrust from Vukovar toward Novi Sad, and another from the Bosnian border toward Šabac. The goal was to seize key cities, overwhelm Serbian defenses, and force a total recall of Serbian forces from the front lines. At first, the attacks seemed successful. Croatian tanks rolled across the border, and Bosnian infantry pushed through the mountains toward Serbia. Serbian defensive forces, a mix of reservists and border guards, were stretched thin but held their ground. The fighting was fierce, a grinding struggle for every village and every road. But the attackers soon realized that Serbia was not alone. Belgrade to Bucharest, the Two Seas Alliance has attacked. We need aid on our northern and western fronts. Bucharest to Belgrade. Our forces are at your disposal. Our pact holds. Romanian wings arrived from the north not as diplomats but as weapons. Fighter squadrons thinned the skies above the front, their strikes chopping into approaching columns. Strike aircraft hammered supply nodes and assembly points. Artillery that had been destined for Bulgaria now smote the invaders at the Serbian line. The combined Serbian-Romanian defense stiffened into a living barrier. Croatian columns found themselves flanked. Bosnian advances slowed by entrenched fire, and the dream of a quick seizure of Novi Sad and Šabac ran aground. Yet elsewhere, the alliance's gamble bore fruit. As Serbian eyes turned to meet the northern assault, Albanian and Kosovar forces struck in the west. While the Croatian gambit faltered, Albania and the Kosovo insurgents, seeing their opportunity, launched their attack. Their offensive was a brutal, determined push into western Kosovo, aiming to reclaim key strategic towns they had lost. Tirana. The main force is distracted. Strike hard and fast. Reclaim what is ours. The Albanian offensive moved furious and unrelenting, a storm of infantry and mobile teams designed for urban brutality. In Pea, the fighting was unforgiving. Alleyways became killing corridors. Apartment blocks turned into fortresses, and the battle took on the character of close-quarters slaughter. Serbian defenders, reservists, local Serbs pressed into desperate defense, held ground with courage, but weight and coordination favored the attackers. In bloody, grinding urban combat, the Albanians seized Pea. The city fell after hours of fighting that left streets carved in smoke and ruin. The losses were significant, but from Belgrade, the news was received with a grim sense of victory. They had held the main fronts, and while a city was lost, they had not been broken. They were still on the offensive in Bulgaria, and had successfully repelled a major attack on their homeland. But as the armies fought, a new, unforeseen player entered the game. In Ankara, the leaders of Turkey had watched the chaos unfold. The Two Seas Alliance's invasion of Serbia, the Balkan Shield's counter-offensive, the bloody fighting in Kosovo. It was all a symphony of distraction. they saw an opportunity, a moment to strike a blow that would forever change the balance of power in the Balkans. Bulgaria is exhausted. The moment is now. Advance. Turkish armored formations, long-massed and patient along Komotini and the eastern approaches, surged northward with the speed and discipline of a nation that had prepared for this hour. Their columns did not seek pitched battle so much as territory. Fast, overwhelming advance to seize key hubs before defenders could rally. Plovdiv, taken in a day, surrendered more to shock than force. Exhausted Bulgarian units offered token resistance before melting away. Burgas, the gateway to the Black Sea, opened its gates under the shadow of the Turkish standard. The scope of the Turkish drive stunned every command in the region. Where Bulgaria still fought, it fought on foreign soil. Where Bulgaria retreated, it fled toward a future that no map could promise. With Bulgarian forces diverted and diminished, the Two Seas Alliance and the Balkan Shield realized their regional game had become something larger. A collision with a power that could crown every victory with crushing consequence. Panic spread through war rooms like a fever. Communications that once thrummed with confident orders now crackled with pleas and fragments. Sofia, cornered and exposed, sent its last, frantic plea. Enough blood has been spilled. We call for an immediate ceasefire and a truce. Let the leaders of the Balkans meet at once to negotiate terms and stabilize the region. The message raced across the Balkans, a plea born from desperation, yet carrying the weight of survival. Whether the fractured nations would lay down their arms or let pride drag them further into ruin remained uncertain. The Balkans paused on the edge of a new chapter, one written by diplomacy or by the next salvo. The war had dragged on long enough for everyone to realize one uncomfortable truth. While the Balkans fought each other, Turkey quietly reaped the rewards. Every battle, every advance, every setback was an opportunity for Ankara to shift its lines and secure more land. By now it was obvious, unless the Balkans united, they would all lose. It was a bitter realization. The rivalries between Balkan states ran deep, scars of wars, betrayals, and territorial disputes that had shaped their very existence. Yet the leaders knew there was no other path forward, and so a meeting was called. The city chosen was Athens, a symbolic ground where both history and politics loomed heavily over the talks. The opening moments of the summit were tense. Old rivalries filled the air. Suspicion between Sofia and Skopje, resentment between Belgrade and Tirana, mistrust between Bucharest and nearly everyone else. And yet, beneath the surface, there was also fatigue. A sense that this endless struggle could only end in ruin if something did not change. The first breakthrough came when Bosnia was placed on the table. Its future had long been disputed. Divided into entities, contested between Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks. But this time, the leaders agreed. Bosnia would remain independent, whole, and indivisible. Sarajevo would stand as the capital of a united state, with all its peoples equal under one banner. It was a bold declaration, and one that silenced the room for a moment. Next came Kosovo. Serbia demanded recognition of its hold, but reality had shifted. In the fighting, Peja had been taken through the joint forces of Albania and local insurgents. The Albanian representatives insisted on keeping it, sparking heated debate. Voices were raised, fists slammed against tables. But in the end, compromise was forced. Serbia would keep Kosovo, but Peja would remain outside its control. It was a bitter pill for Belgrade, but without Albania's participation, there would be no united front against Turkey. Then came Romania. The wars against Bulgaria had left deep wounds, with territories taken and retaken. Bucharest agreed to withdraw from Bulgarian lands, restoring them, except for Rus, a strip along the Danube. Romania insisted on keeping this as an enclave across the river, a small concession for its sacrifices. Sofia objected, but it was accepted. Macedonia's role was clearer. Its forces had taken large stretches of Bulgarian territory during the earlier campaigns, and the decision was made to let them hold what they had conquered. This was not an easy outcome for Sofia to accept. For Bulgaria, the agreement was a humiliating blow. Their lands in Macedonian hands, their pride scarred. The only consolation offered was a promise. If the United Balkan offensive succeeded, the territories Turkey had seized would be returned to Sofia. It was a bitter bargain, but one that Bulgaria had little choice but to take. Piece by piece, a settlement emerged. Lines were drawn, promises made. It was not perfect, and no one left the table fully satisfied, but for the first time in generations, the Balkans had a common cause. The final decision was the most important. The war would not end in half measures. The offensive would begin by freeing the occupied Greek territories. This would be the first test of Balkan unity, to strike together, to bleed together, to prove that cooperation was more than words on paper. By the time the summit closed, the room that had begun with rivalry and suspicion had transformed into something else. Not friendship, not trust, but a pact, sealed by necessity. The leaders shook hands, knowing that once their armies marched side by side, there would be no turning back. And so, with the ink barely dry on their agreements, the Balkan states prepared for what would become the largest combined offensive of the war. Their target, Thrace. The battles for Xanthi and Komotini would determine whether this fragile unity was real or just another fleeting illusion in Balkan history. The drums of war beat once more, but this time the sound carried across borders. For the first time, the Balkans would march as one. The offensive began at Xanthi. The Turkish garrisons were well dug in, but they did not expect such a coordinated attack. The Balkan forces advanced with precision. Artillery thundered across the plains, infantry stormed the streets, and armored columns crushed resistance point by point. Smoke and fire turned Xanthi into a battlefield maze. For days, brutal clashes raged house to house, but the combined might of the Balkan advance broke the defenders. When the city finally fell, it was not the triumph of a single army, but of many standing together. From there, the armies pushed toward Komotini. Here the Turkish resistance was fiercer. Well-placed ambushes shattered the first waves, defensive lines slowed the advance, and air raids harassed the columns as they pressed forward. Yet the unity of the Balkan armies proved decisive. Formations reinforced each other, flanking maneuvers unraveled Turkish positions, and no attack was carried out in isolation. The fighting dragged on for over a week, with streets changing hands multiple times. But at last, Komotini was liberated. The cost was high, but the victory undeniable. The victory electrified the region. Soldiers who once faced each other across battle lines now shared rations, embraced and celebrated. Across the Balkans, from mountain villages to city streets, hope surged that perhaps this time, unity could hold. The message was clear. Divided they had bled, but united they could win. But in Ankara, the news was met with cold calculation. Turkey's high command faced a choice: defend its newly conquered holdings in Bulgaria, or retreat and prepare for a final defense of its core territories. The decision was swift. The Balkans would be allowed to reclaim what was taken, But the border of Turkey itself would not be touched. Every division, every tank, every plane was recalled to defensive lines stretching from Edirne to the Aegean. Unaware at first, the Allies regrouped and launched a wide offensive from Plovdiv and Burgas. Long armored convoys and columns of troops moved in unison, covering the open roads with overwhelming force. Air and artillery units kept steady pressure ahead of the advance, prepared for a massive Turkish counterattack that never came. Still, progress wasn't bloodless. Scattered firefights flared along the route, delaying actions set by small Turkish detachments, roadblocks defended until the last moment before being abandoned. Villages briefly turned into fortified positions, where sharp exchanges of fire erupted before the defenders pulled back deeper south. Each clash reminded the Allied command that Turkey's main strength was still intact, waiting. Yet the lack of full-scale opposition was telling. Within days, the Balkan Unity Forces liberated vast stretches of land almost unchallenged. By the time they neared the original border, the soldiers could sense the silence before the storm. The enemy was not broken, only holding its ground for what was promised to be a final stand. But as the armies drew closer to the Turkish border itself, the tone changed. A message arrived from Ankara. Blunt, uncompromising. No one will cross this line. If you try, hell will be unleashed. The Balkan leaders debated fiercely. Some urged a final push, arguing that Turkey's bluff should be tested. Others warned that crossing into Anatolia would mean catastrophe. For days, messages passed between Ankara and the leaders of the Balkan Unity, each side drawing lines, each side warning of the price of escalation. And then, quietly, an understanding was reached. The Balkans had regained their lands. Turkey had safeguarded its heartlands. The war had burned itself out, and neither side had the appetite to risk annihilation. The peace was declared. After years of bloodshed, destruction, and betrayal, the Balkans were war-free at last. Soldiers returned to their homes. Borders were redrawn, not by force but by agreement. For centuries, history had repeated the same lesson. Division brought only weakness. But this time, something was different. This time, the Balkan states had written a new chapter, one not of endless war between neighbors, but of strength through unity. And so the series closes where it began. In the Balkans, a land forever shaped by rivalry, but now perhaps for the first time, aware of its power when united.